Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions. We are a cybersecurity podcast that is all about access. Access to people and ideas that can impact your career and help you secure your organization. Hi, my name is Bruce Sussman. I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld and your podcast host. And in today's session, we are speaking to Myla, Director for Trend Micro Research.
So every day we collect terabytes of threat data.
Her team tracks more than 5 billion threats daily.
From honeypots, from submissions from our partners, from customers, from feedback loop, from a lot of our crawling technologies. So we are attempting to combine all this collection of data from many sources. So this gives us one thing, the visibility of the nature and type and even the geolocation of the threat.
And right now, the research team at Trend Micro is tracking and updating a very sudden surge in coronavirus-related cyber threats. Threats that spread as suddenly as the virus itself, 24 hours a day. The company has uncovered more than 900,000 threats related to the COVID-19 pandemic. A link to findings is in the show notes. This includes malicious URLs, phishing attacks, malware, trojans, spam, and even business email compromise attacks themed around our current pandemic emergency. And these things are just on the surface. What about the dark web? I'm asking Myla Pilao about that today as well. Her interview, well, you'll hear it. It's like a short course on how cyber criminals use an opportunity like this to attack organizations and end users. Here is our discussion. Myla, thanks for being on the podcast today. Tell us a little bit, first of all, about your role at Trend Micro. How would you describe it in some details about it?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me here, Bruce. I'm part of a team of fantastic researchers worldwide. We are part of Trend Micro Research, and currently I'm based here at our newest research center in Toronto. We are a group of almost 1,000 researchers worldwide, spread in almost 15 research centers. And our focus has always been to look at what I call the trajectory of threats, threats that speaks of the now, which means what are we looking into right now, what likely will be the future, and anything that, kind of covers the scope of threats on areas of just typical malware, on vulnerability, even mobile. And we also look into how a lot of these threats will interject into the tools that we're using, into the technology that we're subscribing to, and even on infrastructure that we're in. Another interesting area that we do is look at the behavior, the motivation, and really the direction of a lot of the cyber criminals. So we take a little look into that area as well.
I know Trend Micro is a global organization. When you mentioned that you have close to 1,000 researchers, my jaw dropped. I know you can't see that, but it did. So that's fantastic. That's what I call threat intelligence right there. That's excellent.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So we are kind of wanting to talk about the issues that are going on right now in the world. And I think front and center for a lot of people is a sense of frustration and just angst over the fact that hackers and cyber criminals, they are taking advantage of the coronavirus pandemic. And based on your research and your time in the industry, does this surprise you or not?
Well, not at all, actually. When we look at this global health crisis, that I always say it really pushes us to the unknown territory, just because there's a known source, there's a known spread, and even sadly, an unknown future. But when you look at it in our world, in cybersecurity, this is pretty much known to us, meaning to say that it is extremely predictable on how what we call the cyber criminals would really act on it. And there's only one thing that they would do. It's precisely how they will seize this opportunity. So this is not something that surprises us in great length. This is a highly, I would say, traditional direction or route that a lot of the criminals will take. It can be any global issue pertaining to, natural disaster, popular topics, and sadly, crisis like this. They will definitely take advantage of it. What I call their interest is really what I call the riding the wave metaphor or the behavior, which means that for them, when they seize this opportunity, they will get maximum exposure with what I call minimal to very little effort because it's already in the news, it's all over. The only thing that they need to do is plug in their attack and it will come and it will go as easy as it could be. So this is something not surprising.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point, that idea of just being a golden opportunity where the spotlight's already out looking for attacks and then you plug in, there's your attack, that was me, and you get the credit for it, right?
Mhm.
So I see what you're saying. Interesting. Okay. Well, I know along that lines, talking about the number of threats out there, I think that you guys have something called the Smart Protection Network that
Mhm.
detects these. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you can explain and then tell us about the large number of threats that you have detected and what that reveals.
That's right. In our technology, we don't carry a lot of sexy names. So it's just plainly called Smart Protection Network, but let me take it a little bit more deeper in it. When we look at everyday threats, it's billions, right? There are billions of threats that really are scouting our digital world. I remember, Bruce, when I started this business, I've been in this business for about 16, 17 years, and I stopped counting from there. Every day in my time, we get about 100 a month. And we will clap our hands, literally, because that means there's a job to do, right?
Yes.
Today, every day, we probably get about 5.5 billion unique threats. Just
Wow.
imagine how much are we doing that. And really thank God for automation. So Smart Protection Network, the key to a lot of the things that we do today is detection. So I'd like to beg your indulgence. I want to put it in today's health pandemic, right? As an analogy to this. If we don't have, in this business that we do, if we don't have the variant or simply saying the sample of the virus, then we cannot come up with a solution. And exactly what we're facing today, right? So we have to really look into that sample. So consider Smart Protection Network as what we call a proactive collection of threat intelligence. Remember the numbers that I said. We started this business 32 years ago, from the hundreds to the billions. This is all housed in what we call SPN, or Smart Protection Network. It has the capability to analyze all these threats from what we call 0 to hour, because every second counts. We are super thankful because latest technologies like machine learning, cloud automation, big data analysis really allows us to handle this humongous data. So the key element of this global threat intelligence, I would probably compound them into three. Number one is the collection. So every day we collect terabytes of threat data coming in from honeypots, from submissions from our partners, from customers, from feedback loop, from a lot of our crawling technologies. So we are attempting to combine all this collection of data coming from many, many sources. So this gives us one thing, the visibility of the nature and type and even the geolocation of the threat. So that gives us the collection. After we're able to collect it, the most important thing is really to detect and identify it. Gone were the days where the attack starts, for instance, on a mobile network and ends in a mobile, right? Or in a laptop or in a server. The analysis for us is the ability to correlate the relationship of an attack to the many other vector points it is attempting to look at, because traditional attacks are no longer one vector point. They will really manifest in many of your resources, right? And then we're able to correlate it with the criminal behavior and the environment that they will probably attack. So that is very important. So it's almost like predicting, but also looking at it, where it's going to move. And the third element is the most important one. With that first two, we're able to push proactive protection, meaning to say that we're able to really refine the solution because we know where it starts and where it will go. And then we push what we call the protection as rapid as we can. And thank God for cloud infrastructure because people don't have to download big files. Everything is pushed in their cloud. And this is, again, gives them the protection that they need. We call it like one is to many. So it doesn't just detect the threat of today, but likely it will try to predict what's the next variant. So hopefully you're also protected with that.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, I realize the SPN may not have a sexy name, but boy, it is impressive. I was really intrigued. So I like it. I like it. Very smart. That's cool. I know that in your research and that you were updating on your blog post about the threats around coronavirus, you've come up with some incredible numbers. I think it was like 900,000 threats right now or something related to the pandemic. And the numbers are surging as well over time. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. When attacks like this comes in, they only follow the movements of the issue. So when we look at coronavirus, definitely it started somewhere in Asia, right? In terms of the pandemic, right? So naturally, the first discovery that we've seen is around that line as well, as early as the second or third week of January, right? And in my experience in this industry, extremely highly likely the attack will always start with a spam. That has not changed, and I don't think it will. So that's very predictable. But when we look at the first discoveries of attack that we are looking into COVID-19, they are what I call low-level attack, or what you call the typical spam, typical phishing attacks, right? Nothing really very complex. And again, this is very normal. This is quite normal. When you look at what is happening at those weeks or months, majority of the business that have been affected, apart from obviously the healthcare system, is shipment, right? So shipment is definitely one of the most top, I guess, phishing samples that we've seen, apart from health updates. So this is very intuitive. When we look at the target that they have been looking into, and again, it follows countries specifically to China, Korea, Japan, because this is where the problem was at that time. It wasn't spreading much to our zone. So noticeably, as what we call the scope and the spread progresses, thus also the severity of attack. So fast forward from mid-January to where we are right now, which is early April, one of the things that we've seen is the dramatic surge. So today, from a 65% of the attacks coming in from email, vector, or spam, it is now 95% that are related to that. And we're talking of from a 4-digit infection to almost like 6 digits. So this is almost 20,000% increase, right? One thing that we have to note also is, as I said earlier, we have not seen much of the complexity or severity, but today we're seeing it now in less than 2 months. So severity comes across in many forms. So we've seen the first ransomware, which is again one of the top favorites of a lot of criminals. We've seen extortion to its finest, from low level to very cruel extortion emails. Interestingly, we've seen applications being targeted as well, whether they are mobile applications or applications that we kind of use during this situation. So that's where it is going. And sadly, it has been also maneuvering into a lot of the global organizations that you and I follow, like World Health Organization, some of the tracking systems or sites that we looked into to look into the trending, and even charitable institutions. So they're going a little bit more into this sort of area.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, well, a couple things I want to follow up on. First of all, it sounds to me, Myla, like you're saying when the pandemic starts, and let's say it's limited to certain geographies, that's where the threats or attacks around that are most likely. And then as the pandemic spreads in the real world, the attacks follow in the real world as well to those geographies. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then the other thing that I think I heard you saying was the more serious the situation, like you go from talking about a few cases to we're locking everybody down and sheltering at home, that as things get more serious in the real world, the attacks often transition from kind of those low level attacks to more advanced type of threats. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
I mean, that is a phenomenal parallel. So I see exactly what you were saying about tying this together with the pandemic movement and the threats. That's phenomenal. And you just mentioned a moment ago about attacks against like the World Health Organization or other key organizations in this fight. What are you seeing on that front? I think, as I remember reviewing your report, there was some credential harvesting related stuff going on.
That's correct. So again, I would take you back into the mind. I always say this. Some people don't love it, but if you think like us, I think if you think like us criminals, right? There's two things that you would do. Number one is, would you just use something that is a method that is highly reliable and easy for you to deploy, or would you spend your time inventing on tools that probably will be high risk but high gain, right? I would think the more pragmatic approach is doing the first one. So when we look at right now, the type of attacks that we're seeing, like spoofing, phishing, copying some files, etc., this is what I call criminals reusing their old methods. So the kind of malware that they are using today in some of the samples that we have been seeing are originally coming from what we call the banking Trojan malware era. And this is as far back as 2015, 2014, where the banks become very automated. And as a result, there were creations of malware that attempts to harvest and steal information, right? So naturally, the criminals are reusing this method. It is still there, but they're just changing what we call the facade. They're just changing what we call the context of the messaging, etc., right? But the drop or the attack is the same. So let's take a look at it, for example, some of the samples that we publish in our Trend Micro blog using, let's say, World Health Organizations or the tracking methods. So when you think about it, the arrival method will naturally be either in the form of spam or phishing, right? That's always, 99% will be the mechanism. The next one that they will do really depends on what their intent is. A majority of what we see is just really the typical redirect or a malicious link, right? So this is what you call they will copy that particular image, execute it, and try to put you in a site that is obviously malicious. And then it really depends on what they will do on that site. So the execution level really depends on the intent of the criminals. They can just put you through a link, allow you to download a file, or allow you to really share or reply, right? So the execution really is customized. When we looked at it, the third area is what do they do after that, right? So this is where the stealing of information comes in. Because if you go to redirect to a particular page, whether it's, let's say, a donation to help fund for our medical team or a donation for a certain country, then naturally you will key in your information. So that's where the stealing or the harvesting of the information comes in. Because remember, you are lodging your information on the malicious site, not on the actual site. The second one is that they can just really drop a particular malware without having you visit the site, which means that you execute it and they will drop that file. When they drop that particular file, it can hijack your system. It can collect information, but they're not so excited. It might be, to stay there for a while. Normally they do this for big organizations. Or worse, is really damage your operating system, right? So that's the natural kind of behavior, or I would say the route that they normally take. But today, the first one that we see, I would say 5 out of 10, is stealing information but using credible organizations as bait.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, it's It's just amazing, and I like that juxtaposition you gave of they're using their tried and true tools in ways that match the current landscape. So that's very interesting. I know that you and certainly members of your team spend considerable time on dark web research and intelligence and everything else. What are you hearing, or what's happening in forums in the dark web right now related to the coronavirus?
hmm I guess one thing that we have to recognize, Bruce, and I'm sure you do, and a lot of our viewers or audience, is the fact that whether you call it dark web, underground world, the point is that this world is just like your organization and my organization, right? They're very structured. They have heavy sensor. They know what's happening in the real world. So as a result, they really are able to really be agile, just like our organization, right?
Right.
So
Wow.
in the case of COVID-19, sadly, is the fact that this is really an opportunity for them. So this is a very, very busy marketplace. So some of the things that we see that are on demand right now on the underground or dark web is they do three big key areas, at least in the last few months that we've seen. Number one is that you notice already that they are trading, sharing, and collaborating on typical exploit kits, malware, whatever that they wanted to use to optimize COVID-19, right? So they're doing that. The second one, interestingly, is that they also do a marketplace for tangible materials. So where you can buy N95 masks, where you can buy sanitizer, where you can get alcohol, the production, etc. That's quite interesting. Because they also are doing that import-export stuff, right? But
Right.
probably, I don't know, for what cost and what quality. The third area that they're doing is heavily discussing it, like what we're doing today. If you and I are discussing what attacks are coming in COVID-19, they're also heavily discussing what's the next level of attack that they would do. How will Bitcoin, crypto mining will be used here? How will ransomware going to be changed? All of this conversation that they're having also it exists in this world. So those are the three areas that we looked into. It really depends on whether you go cheap or expensive. There are even the latest one that we have uncovered a couple of days ago is that they're now selling a very, very tough, what I call a code sign certificate, because if you want to do a phishing exploit, and if you do a code sign certificate, it will be very, very hard to really detect it, right? So this is being sold on the underground for around $700 to $900 if you want to use that as part of your phishing bait or exploit. So pretty much it's a very busy marketplace, but I say it's business as usual for these people in the dark web.
Yeah, interesting. And the idea that they operate in some sort of organizational fashion like our organizations do and most organizations do, it's a little mind-blowing, and I don't like it, just for the record.
That's right. That's right. Nobody likes them.
Yes, exactly. Nevertheless, though, that is the reality. I mean, that's thank you for that insight. So you've listed off a number of threats. You've listed off a number of things that cyber criminals are doing right now to try and take advantage of the environment and landscape that we're in. If you had a chance to talk to organizations, which of course you're talking to members of security teams right now on the podcast, what would you say as some high level advice or insights that you want to leave us with today?
Mm-hmm. I think we have to recognize that the brutal fact is this will not go away. As I said, as we go very deep into the situation, they will continue to follow us, right? So that's really hard. I just wanted to probably contextualize it into what likely are we going to see, so that we remain very, very vigilant, right? So I would say the two big things that we need to be very conscious about is moving from pandemic to infodemic, meaning to say there is massive proliferation of fake news. Information should enable and educate us. Sadly, as the situation heightens, as the situation progresses, our anxiety level increases, but this information demic is not helping. And we see this clearly in many platforms. It is not exclusive to social platform. We see it almost everywhere. So that's something we need to be very conscious. The second one is the fact that I remember in our 2020 prediction boost, we've talked about how work from home will redefine the supply chain of attack. I think we spoke too soon because we're not even in our second quarter and we're now already implementing work from home into its finest. So when we look at during on to the post-COVID situation, we will see great adaptness to the setup. So some of the things we need to be very conscious is attackers will invade the surface. That is almost 100%. When they invade, we will see that they will get into what we call remote tools, conferencing tools. They will also be challenging what I call data contamination because we're now mixing our personal data, our family data on top of the most complex business data that we do have, right? So the last part is that it's going to be very challenging for our security vanguards because they're used to monitoring and protecting us from a perimeter that is highly secured. But if we are spread all over, and sometimes they don't even know where we are at, then it will be a very challenging to really remotely manage threat intelligence, threat monitoring, and even giving us defenses. So those are the two big areas. I just want our people to be very, very cognizant. And in terms of the suggestion, I'm a great believer for education. I'm no salesperson, but I've always said that the better educated we are, our ability to protect ourselves and the people around us will even be better. So it's non-negotiable. We need to be extremely educated. And thank you for podcasts like this that gives people better awareness. The second thing is that get your information and authorized and credible sources. Remove that anxiety, but just go to the right source. That helps a lot. And the third element, I will relate back, Bruce, to what I said earlier in the cyber industry. If you cannot detect it, you cannot solve it. So there must have a very agile, rapid, and robust detection software, security software that they should have. And it should not be limited to the laptop. It should be in every multiple layer that they are using right now, especially in the work from home situation. So the ability for them to detect it and block it really depends on how multi-layered protection that they have embedded into their sort of network.
Well, and along those lines, really appreciate your passion for education and sharing and your willingness to come on the podcast. And I was thinking about the fact that you have on your website, and I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes, what you call Developing Story, COVID-19 Used in Malicious Campaigns. And the original post was in March. You've been updating it through April. And it is a fantastic resource for every organization. You really should check it out. It shows the breadth and the depth of the types of attacks that are underway. And it can not only inform your security team, but in some cases, it gives you a lot of real world examples you can share with your end users of things to watch out for, just in that vein of educating everybody about what's going on. So Myla from Trend Micro, thank you so much for sharing what your team has been up to and all the great research work you do. We really appreciate you.
Anytime, Bruce, and we appreciate your platform. And my goal and our goal is, I think, is shared to stay safe online and also offline.
I really appreciate her attitude of wanting to keep everyone safe. And, in my entire dealings with Trend Micro, they're our premier podcast partner, that has been their heart from the beginning of helping secure the community, organizations, individuals, end users. It doesn't matter. They just want to help secure the world. And I really admire that. So thank you to the entire research team for all their contributing. And the research, by the way, which Trend Micro is updating on the COVID-19 threats, I'm putting a link to that in the show notes so you can check it out. Now, I also want to alert you to where you can find the latest information relating to the coronavirus and SecureWorld's 17 regional cybersecurity conferences. You can go to our website right now, secureworldexpo.com. And look for the banner at the top that says Announcement on Coronavirus. Pretty original, right? Well, there is a link to our frequently updated FAQs as things continue to shift around. Also, under the Resources tab on our website, you can find the calendar for our new daily cybersecurity briefings, which we are calling the SecureWorld Remote Sessions. And it's our way to carry out our mission of connecting, informing, and developing leaders in cybersecurity. So thanks again so much to Trend Micro for taking time to speak with us today. Thank you, Myla. And also, thanks to Trend Micro for being our premier podcast sponsor. And thank you to our editor, Pete, who makes this podcast possible week in and week out. On behalf of the entire Secure World team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the Secure World Sessions, and let's catch up again next time.
Det är kul att se.